Welcome to Right on Track, brought to you by the Publishing Club of Laguna Woods. I am your host, Dianna Bolen. Each month, I introduce inspiring and creative people from Laguna Woods and beyond. Today's topic is about love, loss, poetry, and hope. And it's my hope to inspire you, to inform you, and to impact your life in some small positive way. My guest is the lovely and talented Gail Lindsay Slayton. Welcome, Gail.
Hi.
Now, Gail is a poet, and I learned about her work actually through someone who takes a writing class with her. Mm-hmm. And we have, she has brought, and I've been very excited about her book, which is Self-Portraits of a Runaway Wife. And it is an incredible book of poetry.
Thank you.
Yes, and I say that with a little bit of incredulity because I don't like poetry. Your poetry book is the first one that I have ever read that I said, wow, this is stuff that I can relate to. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much.
Thank you, that's wonderful to hear.
Now, did you study poetry?
Well, I've been writing poetry since I was a child, and a lot of different kinds of writing. Mm-hmm. So it's been a long time. And I have studied some, taking classes, workshops for poetry and for writing in general. Mm-hmm. But mainly it flows.
Uh-huh. Well, I think that's true, that it's kind of a combination of having access to some inner creativity, but also having the tools to give the proper voice to that creativity.
Yes.
Yes. Well, and along those lines, I didn't want to have a long list of poems for you to read, but I was wondering if you would be comfortable reading this poem about finally, or if you wanted me to read it. Would you like to read it?
Sure.
Okay.
This is a first poem that is in my book. And it's called Finally. I was going to put it at the end, but the editor said, I think we need to have something positive so they know everything came out okay. So this is called Finally. I am finally comfortable in my own skin. I think that's because it's so loose now. I have room to move around in there, and when I stretch, it has a lot of give. Why didn't I think of getting a skin size bigger before? Always worried what I looked like, hiding the bulges beneath large tops, wearing lots of black. Now I'm comfortable in my skin. I look in the mirror and I'm pleased with the crepes. I always liked that texture before, but I didn't know it would go so well with my soul.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. And when did you write this particular poem? I mean, in your development as a poet, recently or?
Well, it has been in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so most of these poems, because it's called Runaway Wife, mm-hmm. It's a book about relationships, and I had 3 relationships before my present one. And I didn't really start doing this writing until after I left. And after I ran away from that last husband.
Husband number 3.
Number 3. Mm-hmm. That's when I started going back to my roots, taking some poetry classes, and getting into a poetry group that met every year for a month, and we would have prompts and we would do our poems. And so it came from one of those. Mm-hmm.
Ah.
Yeah.
So how do you write? I mean, besides belonging to groups that support you and studying, what are some other elements of your process?
I have a poem in there about the process, and most of it is, I used to get up really early in the morning, like at 4 o'clock. Now I try to sleep till 6, but it's a real quiet time.
Yes, it is.
And I have, in the past, done a lot of meditation. And when I wrote some of these poems, I would listen to Deepak Chopra and Oprah in their, 21-minute poetry or their meditation. And so I would go into the meditation just with a thought. And as I was meditating, the poem would take form. And by the time that was finished, I would sit there and I would write what came to me.
So when you say the poem would take form, I'm curious about that. So what I'm aware of in meditation is that it's a kind of sitting quietly and letting the thoughts flow through your mind like clouds. So within that context, how did the poem take form?
Because, well, as a therapist, I did a lot of work with left brain, right brain. And when we're in, doing meditation, we're really getting into that space, letting go of that chattering
Yes.
left side of the brain. The right side is the real creative side. So what I found is it is like that cloud, and things just come. Out of thin air, you get the answers. So
Yes,
it's
yes.
not 1, 2, 3. You never can get poetry that way.
Yes,
It has
yes.
to just be in the flow.
Yes, and it's a pretty remarkable experience because it's almost, I mean, and I don't want to sound too new agey, but it's almost as if you're channeling information.
A lot of times that's what it feels like. And I have a spiritual part in the back of the book, and that's what it felt like. I didn't really write it. It came through me.
Yes, yeah, it
So.
came through you, and there it was,
Yeah.
and almost perfect.
Yeah.
And that's where your craft comes in, because then you make a few changes here or there, but the essence is right there.
Exactly.
Delivered. Better than Amazon.
Yep, that's it.
So how did this book come to be published?
Well, as I said, I literally ran away from my third husband and started writing all these poems, and they were all over the place, papers and on my computer and every place. And I kept saying, one of these days, I have to write a book about this experience that I had, because it really wasn't about being in a bad relationship or an abusive relationship. It was more about leaving that person who I was, that allowed myself to be in that relationship, and to get to a place where I was in my own skin, in myself. And so for years, it took me time to go through processes. I went through my own therapy, and when I moved to Tucson, it was really the first time in my life. I was 61 when I moved to Tucson, and I really didn't spend a lot of time with women. And so I got into some women's circles and groups, and my life opened up. It blossomed, and it was a wonderful experience, and I was really getting grounded, felt really good about myself. And that's when I met Don, my present partner. And at the beginning of COVID, he said, we're home, time to write the book. So I gathered up all of these poems. At first I was going to write a story, and I was going to, but when I sat down with that, it was so heavy. I just said, I can't do this. I don't want to go back there. I don't want to tell the negative stuff because that's not who I am anymore.
Yes.
I want to have a book that's for women who might be in a situation like an abusive situation, but it doesn't have to be. You know, it could be just not happy with where you're at right now.
Yes.
The book said, take a step, any step, just do something to change your life, and it happens.
Yes, it's amazing how
Right?
that happens.
So
Yeah. So then
Anyway,
your
then-
husband helped you?
he pushed me to do it. I went in there and I got all the chapters, and all of a sudden it came together. And I had a friend of mine who was an editor, and so she took the book, she got it up on, you know, Amazon and Kindle for me. And this was, I've taken some classes, but not many in art, but a friend of mine said, you need to put your own painting on there, not somebody else's artwork. So that's how that ended up there.
Yeah,
so
that's
why
wonderful.
it's self-portraits, because it's got this portrait and it has a lot.
And
This goes back to my whole autobiography, back
Yes.
to the beginning.
But it's not heavy. I mean, there are heavy parts, but it's not a heavy autobiography.
Yes.
It's inspiring. Yes, yes. And the
you.
picture on the front is kind of like your
My
picture on the
picture.
back. Where I was like, oh, yes, that's really good.
Tell that's me.
Yes, and I understand you are in the process of writing another book. And there's a
Yes.
history behind why you're writing this other book.
Yes. Well, when I met Dawn, our relationship just took off, and it was just wonderful. And we had so much in common, but really it was our heart space. It was that we cared about each other so much that every single day we were making the choice to be together. And so for the first 2 years, you know, we dated and then we moved in together. During COVID, we found out that he has Alzheimer's.
How did you
So-
find that out? What is the process? Because it's such an elusive kind of disorder. I mean, I thought that
Yes.
you didn't really get to know Alzheimer's was the culprit until after death, when they did an autopsy.
Long time ago, that
Oh.
was the case. Now, you could go to your doctor if you're feeling like your memory is going, and they will give you a cognitive test. And if it comes out a certain way, they'll send you to a neuropsychologist who will give you a big test. Dawn went through 7 hours of
Oh,
a
my
test. It was
goodness.
grueling. And nowadays, they can also tell through a spinal tap or through a PET scan to see if there's amyloid plaque on the brain. But back then, he went through that test. And it was devastating for both of us, because
can
finally we
imagine.
have this wonderful relationship, and we were just, you know, expecting everything to open up for us. And then came COVID, and everything closed down for everybody.
Yes,
And then this closed down more.
yes. Oh,
you
my
know,
goodness.
For us. So I started writing some poetry about my experience with being with somebody who has Alzheimer's. And, you know, he is at a stage where his left brain is not working so well. So he can't use computers, problems with, you know, finding channels on the TV, anything like that. But he still is so heart-centered, and we have wonderful talks. We run a drum circle here,
Ah.
you know, so
Yes, in fact, may I interrupt for just a
Yeah.
sec? I will show you. I took this out of the paper, the globe, and there you are
right.
with Don. Yeah.
Yes, and so that was one thing that we wanted to do when we moved to Laguna Woods, because that's something that he's done for 30 years. He knows how to play the drum. He was teaching it, and we wanted to give back.
Yes.
And I wanted him to stay connected through something he loved.
Yes. And just as a quick rule of thumb, because you've mentioned right brain, left brain a couple of different times, a good way to remember the difference, and this is just rough, it's not like hard science, but left brain is for language. Without language, you cannot worry. Pretty much you need those words to plan, think of the future, think of the past, and also to worry, okay? Right brain, good way to remember it, is right now, in the moment.
Yes.
You are sensory. You can feel things, hear things. It's everything happening right now.
And very creative.
And very creative, exactly. A lot of your
Yes.
creativity, well, it's kind of like the creativity comes from the right brain, but then the left brain puts the structure to it.
Yes.
Yes.
And the left brain is very structured. It's very linear.
Yes.
So it's, I'll try A, no, then that doesn't work. I'll try B, I'll try C. You know, that doesn't work for poetry, but it also doesn't work in Alzheimer's. So,
Yes, yes. So
Yes.
advice I have for you, which I was saving, I didn't tell you this in the green room, is that when you're finished with your book for about Alzheimer's, do not self-publish. All right?
okay.
See if you can, see, because you already have a foot in the door by having this book, which is a good piece of work. All right. So you can take this to an agent or take, you know, it's not really like in the old time you could just walk it through the office, but you would send a copy to the agent as well as your new book. And you could try to get, I forget what it's called, it's like a bidding war. So the agent is able to take your book to a number of publishers. It's an event where they bid on your book.
Oh, that's great.
Because once your book is self-published,
Right.
it's not going to be picked up. I mean, unless you can show them that you have sold at least 500 copies. Okay, so then it would be a different game. But, you know, so resist that urge to self-publish if you feel like it's a product that can really be beneficial and that is well done.
Thank
So
you.
you're welcome. So, and there are ways to find agents. I mean, they're out there because agents get 15% if they, you know,
If they do it.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. So they're incentivized
Yeah.
to take your book.
And that's one reason I got into the publishing club here in Laguna Woods.
Yes.
How about that? Give me
Yes.
for the next one.
Yes.
All right.
So, of the many things in your book, let's see, where should I go? Well, I think I'll go to your 5 rules, and because that's a kind of a neat place to start. And let's see if here we go. So I'm going to read these because they're only 5 and they're very short. 5 simple rules by Gail. 1, stay in the body. 2, breathe to connect with the one. 3, seek out the lessons. 4, experience joy. 5, return the body when done. I just think that's delightful. Yes.
It kind of touches all of the bases.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Some of it is science fiction, but I like it. 'Cause
Yes.
that's, you know.
Yes, no, it's just wonderful. And then other things that are in here that I thought, so in your epilogue, you have life lessons through relationships. And I'm just going to read the beginning of each paragraph. And if you want to comment, you may. Okay. I learn something about myself from every person that I meet.
That's
Anyway,
definitely true.
Yes. That's right. Lessons are all over.
Yes, they are. You just have to be open to them.
Uh-huh.
You know, and I'm always hopeful, and I'm always like open to what's coming in.
Yes, which is very important to do, especially in today's world,
Yes.
because we get in our little bubbles and then we're not open at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you say, I learned something about myself when I slow down and check inside, allowing my inner voice, my intuition, and my spiritual self to open me to a new path.
Yes. And I think meditation has done a lot towards that for me. When I talk about breathing, like in those 5 rules.
Yes.
Because the breath does connect me with that inner self, and that connects to everything.
Yes, yes, it does. Then you say, I learned something about myself when I realized that we are all doing the best we can with what we know.
Yes. And that helps to let go and not carry the wounds or carry grudges. People asked me with this 3rd husband that I, left 13 years ago, how can you still talk to him? Every once in a while, we check in, because people would say, I just would forget it. He was terrible. But nobody is all terrible. Everybody has those good parts and some parts that may not work, for another relationship.
Yes, yes. And I think it's also, that gets rid of a lot of judgmentalness. I mean, if you come at an interaction thinking, wait a minute, this is not like aimed to make me upset. This person is doing the best they can.
Yes.
And perhaps even they're having a bad day or something.
That's it.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Then you say, I learned something about myself when I realized that I can ask for help and support. This is part of being human.
Yes. That was a big one for me.
It is for most of us.
I just plowed away and I tried to fix things and do my own without, and here I was a therapist, without asking other people for help. It was a very humbling experience for me when I first left. I came down and I stayed at my brother's house in LA. And, well, you know what happened in the book. There's some poems that talk about what happened after I left.
We'll keep the audience in suspense.
Yes, yes. But at that point I said, well, you know what? I think I need therapy. So I found a therapist, and it was from an organization. And this was in October. In December, they decided they're going to have a big party, Christmas party for everybody. I said, okay, I'll come. I didn't know they were going to give each person something. Because, anyway, they gave me this big bag, big black bag, looked like a doctor's bag, and I opened it up. And there were all of these items which I really needed because I ran away. I had nothing.
Oh, my
there was,
goodness.
Little shampoos and different things that, because everything was frozen, I didn't have money, I was like stuck for a while. And then I see this note in there, and it was this Girl Scout troop that put this together. Oh, it makes me cry now just to think about it.
It's emotional,
because I was that one in the Girl Scout troop doing, because my mother did a lot of volunteer work, so I grew up being the one to give. This was the first time I was on the receiving end, and it was wonderful and humbling, and I realized I need to ask for help.
Yes.
And that people are willing wanting
Yes.
to give it. I finally got that.
Yeah, isn't it a tough
know?
lesson to learn? And I think that Laguna Woods
Yes.
is one of those places where, for the most part, it's a supportive community.
Yes.
It's delightful. Yes, but you have to be willing to ask for help and not just be the one that's giving all the time.
Yes,
And
that's-
as a therapist, yes, it's safer to give.
That's a big burnout.
Yes, burnout. So then you say, I learn something about myself when I allow my creativity to flow and when I share my learnings. So,
Yes. And that was something big for me because I have been writing poetry, as I said, for a very long time. But it was by myself and I never shared it with anybody. And when I started to get up and read some of the poems, that allowed other people to say, oh, I relate to that.
mm-hmm.
And people who needed to hear that there's a way out of whatever they were going through.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I was doing them a service. It wasn't, being too embarrassed to read. It was like put yourself out there in the world.
Yes, putting
know,
yourself out
yeah.
there is like right next to asking for help because it
Exactly.
is a kind of putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And then life is filled with never-ending lessons. Learning to ask myself, and this is great, I love this, what else can this mean? Because, and I'll add a little bit and then I'll turn it over to you, we get stuck, and you've got a poem about anxiety actually
yes.
that's has a great line in there, but we get stuck in our narratives. You know, this means that. That's linear. It's not, what if this means that, or that, or that, or that, or that? You know.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes.
That was a big thing. When I was a therapist, I would talk to my clients about that. And it comes back. On
Yes.
yourself, it's like, yes, I have to practice what I preach here. It's very true.
Yes. And finally, the lesson that changed it all is that it is all about relationship with myself. And you have several poems in here about that. I stopped looking outward and started befriending myself, nurturing myself, and forgiving myself, which led to loving myself. It's impossible to love another without this component. Yes.
Yes, that's it. Mm-hmm. No, I was so outer focused when I was young, and growing up in the 50s, I got married in the early 70s. It was that old pattern of this is what you do. Oh, you're 21, you start looking for a husband, right? My mother said, you don't want to be an old maid, do you?
Well, thank you, Gail, for your time here today. It's been wonderful, and like I said, I just love reading your book, your poems.
Thank you.
I'm a better person because of it.
I appreciate that. And in April, the Publishing Club is going to be having a poetry and jazz kind of like a little cafe feel. And I'm going to be reading from my book, and there is other poets who are going to be reading also. So it should be a fun time. That's on the 17th of April.
Yes, I'm
So
looking forward
take a
to
look
it.
for that.
Yes,
And
Poetry
also-
Month.
Poetry Month, and then the Authors Marketplace is in October, where I will be selling my book. I don't know if the other one will be out by then, but I might have a few poems. Like
Yes.
this, I usually give something with my poems.
That's
So thank you
wonderful.
for having me here today.
Yes. Well, thank you, and have a wonderful month. And then I'll be back next month with a new program. Thank you so much. Thank you, Publishing Club. Have a great day.